Thanks everyone for joining us. We've done so many of these now. It's amazing that we've kept going and we've covered so many different topics. And we've got a brand new topic today, and I'm very excited about it. So yeah, welcome to the user group. For those who are new here, we follow the Microsoft Event Code of Conduct. So you can take a screenshot of that or you can research it later. But essentially, we want to be kind to everyone and welcoming. And if you do have any issues, then you can contact Microsoft or you can contact myself, Kat or Anya, and we'll help you with whatever issue you have. So as I say, in the meeting today, we want everyone to be welcoming, respectful and considerate of others. It's a very positive atmosphere that we want to encourage. You're welcome to express your viewpoints. We're happy to hear all different sides of opinion, but just to be considerate of other people's feelings as you raise those opinions. When it comes to questions, so we're going to turn off microphones at some point, and then if you would like to ask any questions, you can use the chat feature or raise your hand, and we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. And yeah, also we would love feedback about these things. And so what do you want to know more about? What do you want sessions on? These sessions are for the community, so it's really important that we get feedback and we understand what people want. Just some quick housekeeping. So the call is being recorded. We'll be uploading it to YouTube within 24 hours usually. But if it's a weekend, then we might upload it for Monday. Feel free to turn on your cameras. It's great to see people's faces and it helps us to engage and to know who you are and to get a feeling for what the community's like as well. And of course, please use meeting reactions just to show what you're feeling or thinking in any given moment. Next up, we've got the call for speakers. You trying it out, Franco? Yeah, so with the call for speakers, so we'd like to encourage people to speak for us. It doesn't matter whether you're a new speaker or you're an experienced speaker. If you've got something to say on user interface design, user experience or accessibility, all within Power Platform, we would love to hear about it. So please feel free to submit your sessions on Sessionize. If you are a new speaker and you want any help, we're happy to mentor you. So on to today's presentations. So initially we've got Ambesh Singh, and then in second place, we've got Franco Musso, and both are talking about Power Pages. I'm very excited to hear more about Power Pages. And we're going to be looking at, of course, UI, UX, and accessibility in Power Pages, which is a topic that I don't think is too often talked about. So yeah, this will be great. So without further ado, I will very happily pass over to Ambesh if he's ready to present.
Thanks, Charles. Yes, I am. Let me just share my screen.
Thank you.
Sorry, I do have some throat infection, so I think you have to bear with me a bit. It's quite cold here. You do understand.
Yep. If you have any issues, just let us know.
Okay, I think I have shared my screen. If you can confirm.
Yep, that looks good. Thanks.
Fantastic. So, yeah. Thanks for the great insight, and I'm really amazed to need a bit of time to digest all of this thing, whatever will go in the next 45 minutes, 1 hour. Also thankful to Anna, Kat, and Charles again you for organizing the monthly series on the Power Platform UX UI components around it. And today I'm going to talk a bit on ensuring accessibility compliance in the Power Pages, so best practices and the standards. So let's begin into it. And I would like to briefly introduce myself here, and then I will go a bit deep into the session. So my name is Ambesh Singh, Microsoft MVP in the Power Pages in the Copilot Studio. And currently I'm working with the Vision at Deutschland as a Dynamic 365 and the Power Platform Architect. Prior to that, I worked with the Avnat, KPMG Deutschland, and the PSN View, EA Sports. And mostly in my career, I've worked with the Microsoft in the different product groups, global consultings and deliveries. I'm also the mentor and the ambassador of the Power community and love to speak and share my learning on the Azure Power Platform Copilot Dynamic 365 topics over the global events and the conferences. Let's talk about how to ensure the accessibility in the Power Pages. So, Microsoft is committed to make the products and the services accessible for everyone. But before we go deep into that, let's talk about what accessibility is and why it is important in the day to day life, and especially for the Power Pages as an external facing website. Because always remember, Power Pages is the only component in the whole Power Platform which is exposed to the unlicensed user at some point of time. Your data is exposed outside of that one, like without any specific licensing requirement for the end users, basically. Okay, so accessibility basically referred to the design and the creation of the environment, products, and the services that can be used by all the people, including those who have the disabilities. This include also the physical spaces, digital content, and the various form of the communication. Why is accessibility important? So the first thing is inclusivity. Ensure that everyone, regardless of their abilities and the access and the benefit from the same resources and the opportunities. The second and very important thing is the legal compliance. So many countries have their laws and the regulation that required accessibility, such as American with the Disability Act, ADA in the United States, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG internationally. It also improved the user experience. So, accessibility design to often lead to a better overall user experience for everyone, not just to those with the disabilities. Now, we are the human being. We are living in this society, so we do have the social responsibilities here. So we also promote the equality and help to remove the barriers that prevent the people for participating fully in the societies. Also, the last and but not the least, uh, any product work basically in more or less for the profitability. So market reach is an important aspect here, and by making the by making the product and the service accessible, business can reach a wider audience that include the millions of the people with a disability worldwide. Now we go for the accessibility standards. So Power Pages follow some of the global accessibility standards, which include the WCAG 2.1. And when we talk about the web content accessibility guidelines, which is the WCAG, now it starts with the 2.1 that cover a worldwide range of the recommendation to create an accessible web content. There are some of the guidelines that make your content accessible to the wide range of the users that include the accommodation for the people with the visual impairments, hearing loss, limited mobility, inability to speak, as well as maybe if you can talk about the blindness and the low visions. Deafness and hearing loss, limited movement, photosensitivity. Sometimes you have cognitive or the developmental disabilities. And by following these guidelines that also address the accessibility of the web content on the desktop, laptop, tablets, on any of the mobile or the handy devices. The second important, I would say the rules and the laws here are from the US. So US Section 508 or 508. That is basically the US General Service Administrator GC office's government wide policy is tasked under the section 508. So what happened in that case? This is basically a rehabilitation act to provide the technical assistance to help the federal agencies basically to compile with the requirements and ensure that they covered the information and the communication technology is accessible to the user, like accessible and usable basically by every individuals with the disabilities. Next, we live in Europe. So in Europe also, we have a EN 301 or 549. This is basically from the European Telecommunication Standard Institute, ETSI, that provide an open, inclusiveness, and collaborative environment. And these environment basically support the timely development, satisfactions, and testing the global applicable standard of the ICT-enabled systems and applications or the services. To create an accessible website, you have to follow the WAI, ARIA authoring practices. Right now, I think it's a 1.1. It's keep updating based on the new inclusions there, new standards, or yeah, the new recommendations. These authoring practices URL displays here on the slide. So I would also put this in the link. We could follow that one also. Also, please note the important aspect that makers or the developers in the Power Platform or as a maker or a developer, you are also responsible to meeting the accessibility standard when you customize your Power Pages site. Because what we got it from the Microsoft, generally we don't deploy and give it to the customers or the end users. We always make amendments and the changes there. The moment you make any changes, then you are also equally liable to continuing those standards what Microsoft offered to the end users. Now let's quickly move to the next one. And after having the brief around the accessibility in the Power Pages, now let's talk about some of the quick tips of accessible content in the Power Pages now. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, we as a developer or the maker are responsible for the accessibility or to follow the accessibility standards. And whenever we customize the Power Pages, there are some of the guidelines, some of the quick tips for the accessible content in the Power Pages. The first one is you need to make sure a non-sighted or the visually impaired person can do everything what a sighted user can do. So there should be from the functionality or the consumption of the functionality, there shouldn't be any kind of the difference. The way could be differ, but the end results should have been the same. Also, the test, like whenever you build it as a maker, or if you are in the testing team or as a business users or the product owners, you have to test your Power Pages site by zooming in around 400%. And you need to make sure that all of the text are readable and the pages or the controls functions as expected. Color contrast matter. We know there are the different ways to go with the color contrast on, like for the Mac users, different, for the Windows user, they're the different way. But at the end of the day, you use a color contrast tool also to help to see the contrast ratio. Color should not be also, should not be the only visual way to convey or any action to or the information to the end users. If you are changing the color to highlight the text, ensure the colors or the descriptive information is also available in the text. You can also use the alt attribute for every image tag. So if you use an empty alt attribute to hide the images from the screen readers, it's ideally you can use the CSS to define decorative images hidden from the screen readers. Also, you can use the Microsoft Accessibility Insight tool to perform like basically two types of the scan. The first called the fast pass, and the second one is the assessment. In the fast pass, basically automatically it check for the compliance and the dozens of the accessibility requirement and provide you the results. The assessment also more or less the same. It also measures the compliance from the WCAG 2.1 with the level AA success criteria. Then you have to follow, as I mentioned in the last one, WAI, ARIA authoring practices while creating the pages layout or adding any widgets, making any CSS JavaScript changes into your website. Test your site using the same accessibility tool, what your users are using it basically. So an example, if you are use a screen reader, if you are such as a window narrator, if you are on the Windows machine, you can use the immersive reader in the Microsoft Edge browser to make sure that your Power Pages site is rendered and readable, and making it adjustment to the website as needed. This is all, but not, the ends, it's not here. So we know there are more content coming in the next minutes. Also, again, thank you all to be here in the session and bear with me for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And you can subscribe the channel because we also produce a lot of the Power Pages quick tips series and the other Power Platform technology tips on this. But then I would like to give it back to maybe the organizing team. So back to you.
Thanks, Ambesh. That was great. Lovely tips there. Franco, if you're ready to go, then you can go straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. Great tips there, Ambesh. Thanks very much. So I'm not going to go into accessibility too much just because I don't want to overlap on what we're doing there. But when I show the Bootstrap components, I'll mention where we can find out the accessibility tips for there and what goodness is already built in. I'll get my screen shared, the bit I usually forget. Right, super happy to be here and see some absolute rock stars in the audience, as well as, of course, the co-presenters and the organising team. Thanks for having us. So my section is all about next level UI, UX, accessibility in Power Pages. It is a beginner session, so I'm going to go over the topics, show you where we can get the building blocks, but it's not going to be kind of code heavy or anything like that. So for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Franco Musso. I'm based in the UK, Power Pages freelancer. I like to spend as much of the year traveling as possible. I never had a permanent role. That's usually an interesting talking point, apart from I did do the management program at McDonald's and worked everything from front of house, kitchen, cleaner, bit of everything. Father of 4 daughters. I don't do Microsoft certs. That's usually, again, just a bit of controversy. Never stopped me in the permanent world, in the freelance world. Maybe the difference in the permanent world. If you want to connect with me, if we're not already connected, there's LinkedIn, my blog, and X as well. So let's get into this UI UX accessibility in Power Pages. So there's a lot built into Power Pages. It's a really carefully designed framework that includes a lot of elements you might not have been aware of behind the scenes. So what I plan to cover is an arsenal of accessible, user-friendly UI components that are available to us and some design patterns that will unlock intuitive user experiences. And what I mean by that is we're going to look at apps that we use every day. So even if your team aren't necessarily very visual or experienced in UX, or even a user base necessarily isn't experienced in UX and they're responsible for coming up with the requirements, I'm going to show you a bit of inspiration and the kind of things that I'll take cues from. So that'll usually start with apps that I use every day. So even though your user base might not feel that they've got a great amount of experience with apps and with user experience, UI and layouts, they're most likely going to be using professionally designed apps every day, whether that's on Apple, Android, even on smart TVs, interacting with kiosks. There's a lot more about them what you might realize. So for example, a lot of us use internet banking, and what I'm going to try and do is just show a few example screens, click through those and see how that might relate to the apps that we build. So there are certain components, whether it's a Canvas app, model-driven app, or in my case, Power Pages, where there are different kinds of common UI elements we're going to be dealing with day in and day out. So typically, when we land in an app, we want a useful jumping off point. So that'll typically be a dashboard. What's all the information that I need to know at a glance before I make the next move? If we're doing a good UI, if we want to provide that heads up view, so if I was overdrawn £1 million, don't have to be 5 clicks in before I notice that. That's going to be jumping out at me front and center. So I'm going to open up my current account. I can see some transactions. So this might be familiar if you think of the Dataverse world. This is like a form showing a subgrid. So the record I'm on would be my account and the subgrid showing the transactions. So what have I spent, when, and what's the amount? I've got some options to expand on that. So if I click the ellipsis, I've got various form level actions. So actions that are specific to this main record, the account. If instead I was to click on a particular transaction, maybe I want to find some more information about that. So this, I'd be thinking about building into my app design. How can I drill in for extra information? So I can see the transaction ID, when it happened, which card I used, and possibly the format of the transaction as well. Was it Cash Point? Was it Apple Pay? Android Pay? And if I click the ellipsis now, let's see how I can go through a guided process. So this is something we do a lot in Power Pages as well. So I've seen that's opening up in a modal. That's what I would call that type of interaction. That's what it's called in Bootstrap. And I might want to do something with that. So I want to take that, some of the balance from my current account, and provide it form transfer. So you see, I'm going a few steps away from where I was. There's some visual cues to help show me that I'm still within the context of the current account. I'm going to choose who to pay. And I can either transfer between my accounts or choose to someone that I've transferred to before. So these, again, I'm going to be assuming that all my user base are familiar with these kind of things. But when I show you Bootstrap components, you'll see we've got things like modals, list groups, buttons, all that allows us to easily piece this stuff together. So I'm going to transfer that to my classic account. I'm going to go ahead with the full £1 million. And unfortunately, I don't have sufficient balance. But again, you'll see there, that's something that's available to us in Bootstrap. That's an alert, and that's a way to provide some timely information. So in this case, it's on submission of a form if there's any blockers. Likewise, it could be on change of a field. And these are all the kind of things that I know my user base are going to be familiar with these types of interactions. and that's what I'm going to try and build into my app. With a mail app, this is another common use pattern. It's not always necessarily mobile. It just happens to be that I've got mobile screenshots for this. But this is another pattern that we used to. So if there's maybe some high volume actions that we need the customer to do, perhaps an inbox type interface, even if it's not emails necessarily, maybe it's triaging cases. This could be a familiar pattern for us to look at. So maybe these could be cases of different statuses, which is very much how mail's treated in the app. So if you imagine the same message could be unread, it could be draft, already sent, could be marked as junk, it could be deactivated, which would put it into the bin status. When I click through to an inbox, I've got a list. So again, familiar pattern from what we see in model-driven apps or Canvas apps or Power Pages, and I'd expect to be able to drill through to those. And when I drill through, I see a single record on a form. In this case, it happens to be rendered as HTML as an email message. And I might want to perform some actions on that. So I've got toolbar across the bottom. That again is a component that we've got in Bootstrap. So I'd be looking at a nav bar for that. And then I've got a list of actions. That would be a list group, typically in Bootstrap. I mentioned Bootstrap a lot. You'll see later that is something we get bundled in all of the Power Pages sites that we build, all of the portals. That's the relevance of that. But I can perform any actions on there. So, for example, reply, flag, and typically that would either generate me a new record or it would change the status of an existing record. But what you'll see as I go through all these various examples, I'll not bore you with too many more, but even though we've got very different use cases, Audible, the mail app, Spotify, internet banking, there's a lot of commonality in there. So likewise, again, where do I land? I land on a dashboard. There'd be no point on my first login just going to an empty app and waiting for me to go and populate that screen. They're at least going to provide me some recommendations. So here's what I've been listening to lately. Here's what they want to promote, some podcasts. I've got, again, the toolbar across the bottom. I'm going to open up my library, see some of my playlists. I can click through to one of those. And again, I'm taken to some familiar interface. So I've got a form, the main record there being a playlist, and I've got a list of tracks. So that for me is very much like a subgrid, again, whether that's Canvas apps, model-driven apps, Power Pages, and I've got some actions that I can I can perform on the playlist itself. Maybe I want to add some songs, I want to download it, share it, I want to create a jam with someone else. But in this example, I'm going to add a song. And again, I've got some kind of clickable interface. So I'm now looking at related records and I can build relationships from the screen as well. Perhaps there are tracks that I want to perform, actions that I want to perform within the subgrid as well. So maybe I want to do something with that song, Girls Like. Maybe I want to like that track. I want to have it more easily accessible throughout the app. So that, again, something that I'm thinking about, maybe an unwritten requirement. I say maybe, definitely an unwritten requirement on a lot of my portals is something like the like, bookmark, favorite kind of feature, allowing that level of personalization. And final example, Audible, just in case it's something that you've used before, but we've got the idea. You land in a dashboard, you see your frequently visited content rather than just a blank starting point. I see the context of I'm already playing a particular book. I can open up my library. Again, I would expect to see not just a list of the books in my library, but what can I do with those? So let's say Atomic Habits. Maybe I want to write and review that. That takes me to a form. I can play the book, and then click through to leave that review. So that all to me feels very intuitive and also very consistent. So when I'm building my Power Pages experiences, my user flows are all tying back to what is going to be intuitive to that user. What are they expecting to be able to do with each item? What kind of context do they need in each of the screens? What context do they need on that initial landing page on that dashboard? So a lot of us in the audience aren't professional UX designers. We haven't got the budget of Spotify, of Audible, of Apple. So how the heck can we achieve that? So on my Power Pages project, I'm going to be thinking about what's the level of complexity, what's the difficulty level. That could be based on budget, it could be based on who's the team, who has to support this after it's gone live, and that'll dictate how difficult I can go with this. So the lowest level of complexity would be, I'm going to use the out-of-the-box forms and lists and maybe augment them with a bit of code. Medium would be, I'm going to start from scratch. So not start from scratch, but I'm going to start from a blank page and pull in some components from Bootstrap. So I'm not having to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript from scratch, but I can choose from some really well-designed components like cards, lists, components, off-canvas menus, and get to a useful starting point very quickly. Or if it was high complexity, so a lot of the times I've got customers providing Figma and mock-ups that aren't really anything to do with Bootstrap. They're far away from what we get out of the box with Power Pages, and that's really where we'd get into high complexity or a high difficulty level. And if the timeline allows for that, all good. But typically what I would do, even on the same project, if I know we're going to end up at high complexity, I will still start at low. So I will do my minimum viable product using only out-of-the-box components with the odd bit of code here and there, and just prove out, right, so are we 100% sure, is it a conscious decision that what you want to achieve is beyond this forms over lists experience, or is this maybe 80% of where we want to get to, and we'll take the different approach? I usually send us down the medium complexity route that we'll use Bootstrap. So just know you've got those options. So lots of what I'm going to cover, including Bootstrap, responsive, accessibility, is all still totally doable with the out-of-the-box components as well. The main difference is going to be just how much is that look and feel different from your out-of-the-box starting point. So I'm going to take you through some of my go-to components now. And what I'm thinking about is mapping out those user journeys. So I've mentioned Bootstrap quite a few times. What is Bootstrap? It's the most popular front-end framework in the world, and the reason that it's relevant with Power Pages is that it's bundled into every Power Pages site you'll ever create. So until quite recently, we were still on a 10-plus-year-old version of Bootstrap 3.6. Now we're on 5.2, which comes with all kinds of cool new components, which I'll take you through in just a moment. So we don't have to start from scratch. This is great. So we're not having to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript from scratch for a heck of a lot of functionality. I'll take you through just a limited set of that, but know there's tons more. I'll show you where to find that. So the great news is we get to rely on a massive library of professional components that have been designed and built by world famous front-end designers, aka not Microsoft, not the geeks that we usually deal with for the day-to-day UI stuff in Canvas apps, model-driven, and they're battle-tested on millions of websites. So unlike all the cool components we get in Canvas apps, we're not having to temper that with, oh, here's exactly what I want, but damn it, it's in preview and I can't use it on my real-life project. So we get all this with Bootstrap, and I said it comes with every single portal anyway, so there's no additional step to have to integrate it or anything like that. So some of my go-to components, I'll show you on the Bootstrap site in just a moment, but cards, I think you'll have to have been living under a rock not to have seen cards pop up everywhere on all kinds of different websites, including Microsoft's, including SharePoint, and within the Maker portal as well. Collapse, so things like accordions where you've got expandable, collapsible areas of the screen. Modals, I'll show you a few examples of where I've customized those, but these are good for where we've got some just-in-time content or just-in-case content. So maybe when we're considering a mobile layout, not every bit of information or not every button is vital enough to keep on screen at all times, but maybe we just want to draw in some extra information as and when the user requests it. Nav and tabs, so things like our fixed toolbar that we saw at the bottom of the screen on Audible, on Spotify, in the Mail app, that's all stuff that we've got ready built within Bootstrap as well. And accordions. There's many more. I'll show you where to go and find those. But a really important concept in responsive for the web is breakpoints. So I saw Keith did a great job of showing this in his responsive Canvas app session. So what we've got within Bootstrap and on all our Power Pages sites already out of the box is we've got this set of breakpoints, which is really flexible. So it's from a mobile first point of view. So if we don't specify any particular size, if I just say I want this to be col3, meaning 3/12 of the width of the screen, that will work for all sizes, so mobile and above. And I can then say how many columns wide should that be, how many twelfths for small, for medium, for large, or extra, extra large. And these are the resolutions that applies to as well, if any help. So I can say for the exact same element, at mobile size, it should be col12, so full width of the screen. But perhaps once we get up to large, it should be col6. And when it gets up to XXL, it should be col3, meaning it's either the whole width at mobile, it's half the width at large, and it's a quarter of the width at extra large. I'm not having to write any CSS for that. I'm not having to write media queries or anything complex like that. I simply just add that little prefix into the HTML. And again, I'll show you some examples of that. But here's a top tip. A lot of you, I'm sure, will already know this if you've worked in websites and development at all before, but we can actually see the makeup of any site in the world, any website we go and visit. Unlike a Canvas app or a model-driven app, perhaps we can see exactly how that's made. So the not-so-secret sauce, what we'll do, in fact, I'll show you when we go through some examples in a moment, is that we can see exactly the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript that any page is made of. So just bring up an example. So this is a Power Pages site that I've built for a sports portfolio platform. So a few of the Bootstrap elements that I've got in use on this are off canvas. So what we mean by off canvas, again, is that just-in-time content. So I've got limited real estate. I've got certain elements I only want to bring in as and when the user requests them. So things like the navigation, not having to take up space all the time for that. Things like the either sign in or edit my profile section only comes in as and when needed. And if I'm a coach accessing the site, I want to find a certain player or player with certain attributes, I can fire up the search, but again, only as and when it's needed. But as I said, the good news is that I can use the dev tools and just right-clicking anywhere on screen, choosing inspect, and you see, I see the markup for everything. So you could use this on any site at all on the internet. It could be as simple as, I know it's built with Bootstrap and I want to see which element it was. So this is a Bootstrap off canvas element, and it's set to show and the position is start. So show you when we go on the Bootstrap site, there's a lot of variability and options built into these things. So I could say, I want to show it on the left, the top, the right, the bottom. Likewise, maybe if I didn't know what is the element for a heading, I can just inspect that. This makes the web, as you can imagine, really easy to learn web development because unlike a lot of other types of programming, this is completely transparent to us. So I can see that, right, yeah, I know that a heading, in this case, using a heading 3, there's the context. And in fact, I've highlighted a particular portion of that heading to be styled differently in this span. All of that is responsive as well. So I'll show you a few different examples of responsive, but it is all based on Bootstrap. So one of the examples I've got when we go into the mobile section is swapping out content. So I've got a banner image there that's really optimized for large screens, for wide screens. So when I get to maybe mobile resolution, it doesn't make sense to be showing that same wide content. So I've instead use a different image, and it's again based on that grid system. So I've said that for one of the elements, I want to hide it. In fact, not in exactly the right point, but here I can say on small resolutions, I don't want to show it, and otherwise I do want to show it as a black element. So again, not having to write JavaScript, CSS, breakpoints or anything funky like that. I'm just using ready-built bits of Bootstrap. So this, as an example, is a nav bar from Bootstrap. The icons are font awesome, so that comes bundled with Bootstrap as well. Probably worth showing you that. So any of the icons that you see in the font awesome library, if you search for what you want, I'm searching for a search icon. If I choose the free option, all of these are included with Power Pages. There are, I think, thousands, in fact, within that library. So I don't need to upload these. I don't need to import them into a component library or anything like that. I just use it as per any font. And if I click on the one that I want, there's the HTML to include that. So you're getting a lot of starting points and a lot of helpers behind the scenes in Power Pages that you might not have been aware of. So I'm going to take you through now some top tips for mobile first experiences. And the way that I'm approaching this, again, is considering we've got a lot of beginners on there, or also from me trying to provide the best value to my customer base, is how do we achieve this with the absolute minimum code? And you can consider minimum code as me meaning minimum effort. Minimum effort meaning maximum profit, minimum turnaround time. So who's familiar with this one? Give us a show of hands. What we've promised is mobile optimized, and what we get is just a vertically stacked piece of crap. So it's not a nice experience, but it's kind of right. We've done the minimum requirement. We took your fancy busy layout and we've just stacked everything into an endless stream of content. That's not the way I feel we should be approaching mobile in 2025. So here are some of my go-to techniques, and I'll show you some examples of that either on the Bootstrap site or on some of my example portals. So first of all, swapping out content. I've shown you an example of that. So we conditionally hid the wide banner and showed the smaller image. I'll quickly show you another example of that. So go to the Proximo 3 website. In fact, sorry, wrong one. I need to learn to Google. My bad. So here's what I was going to show you. So we've got these tiles showing their valued customers. That's fine for this large resolution I've got at the moment. So showing this on a 4K display or laptop or something like that, perfectly fine to horizontally. I show them in a horizontal row. Typically what we would do when we minimize it down to a small screen is we would say vertically stack them. But if we're struggling for space, something we can do with Bootstrap is say, I want to swap that out. So in fact, when we get to small resolutions, I'm going to display that as a carousel instead. So you might have come across this on other mobile sites, in mobile apps, or perhaps you're used to the horizontally scrolling cards. It's a nice, easy option using what I showed before to say at certain breakpoints, we want to show it in its full, other breakpoints, we want to hide it. So with a little creativity, we can go beyond just that vertically stacked experience and provide something that's truly optimized. So I'd say we've got two ways to roll with this if you are getting your hands dirty with the code, is that if it's a template that we've got, it's something that we've created and we've got hands-on access to the code, it's nice and easy. We'll just lift and shift some code from Bootstrap. I'll show you where to find that. But other times there'll be screens and elements that we haven't got access to the code for, and for that, we'll have to use JavaScript to manipulate what's there on the screen. So we can wrap some content, we can change the markup as we need to. But again, I'd also be thinking as well, right, we're optimizing things for mobiles. Which elements do need to be on screen all the time? What's vital to the experience, and what is just kind of just-in-time content or just-in-case content? Can that go into a modal, an off-canvas, a tooltip, or something like that? So stacking vertically, yes, we can do it, but let's not use that as our go-to for everything. We've got off-canvas elements, like I've shown you, that can slide in from the left, from the right, from the top, from the bottom. We can make our modals full screen. That's a nice touch that I use quite often. So on large screens, if I open the modal and it's just a small central island, that's not too bad on a large screen. But if that's a small central island on a tiny mobile screen, that's not the best. I'll also put some effort into making my links tap friendly as well. So it might be nice and easy to click on my small buttons or the fine text on a large screen, but with my big clumsy fingers on mobile, probably not so much. I can look at clamping font sizes. So as the screen grows and shrinks, I can automatically adjust the font size, possibly like you would in a Canvas app, so basing it on percentages, but with a maximum and a minimum. I can make my buttons block, meaning that they'll take up the full width of the screen. So perhaps, again, certain screen sizes, it makes sense that it's a small inline button, but once we're below a certain resolution, I want to make that the whole width of the screen and nice and chunky and easy to click. I can truncate text. So if you imagine, maybe if you're in something like the Mail app on your iPhone and you've got a super long subject line, perhaps you don't want that to flow over line after line after line. You'll just see a certain portion of it, and then the ellipsis to show you that there's more that's not on screen at the moment. All of those things that I mentioned on screen, I think all apart from clamping font sizes, in fact, I can do just lifting and shifting code from the Bootstrap site, not having to write anything myself. And then as a last resort, I've got media queries and container queries. These are allowing me to get more pro code, I guess, in the sense that I can write some queries to say, right, in between specific sizes, I'm changing specific CSS rather than just lifting and shifting code from Bootstrap. So let me show you where that code comes from. That's the end of the slide, so don't worry, it won't be any more death by PowerPoint. So I'll drop this link in the chat as well, but the Bootstrap 5.2 docs is where I spend a lot of my time. And here's another good example, in fact, of a responsive layout. So here I am on a large screen, and I've got this 3-panel layout. So I've got the main content. To the left, I've got this list of content. On the right, I've got some quick links related to that page. I've got quite a busy navigation bar. Doesn't seem so bad on this high-resolution display, but I've got the links, the logo, search, secondary links, version information. But as I scroll that down, Bootstrap actually, I think, do a really good example of what we might want to do here. So once I get below a certain screen size, you'll see everything gets simplified. So all that busy left-hand nav that I had before is now hidden away in this off-canvas menu. All that secondary information now available in here, like the version info, the links, the related information, and the search is now hidden away in this modal. So I click the icon, get the search. So that's an example of an off-canvas. This is an example of an off-canvas, and that is a modal. So I don't have to code any of that stuff, as I said. So where I would spend most of the time here on the Bootstrap site is looking at these components. So consider this if you're from the Canvas app world, much like your list of components or your component library ready built. So if I, for example, want an accordion, select accordion. I've got a few examples here ready. So as I said, there's usually quite a few variations. So these are built for maximum flexibility. So maybe I want that to be flush within some other element, like a card or a carousel or a modal. So that's what the flush version is for. I've got versions where one Each panel remains open, whereas the default behavior is only one is open at any one time. And for any of the components, useful to know, going back to the accessibility that Ambesh was covering before, there are accessibility tips for all of this. So they'll show you how accessibility is baked into that component. What are the attributes that you need to include to keep that accessible? So things like your ARIA attributes, roles, and all that good stuff. So collapse is one that I use quite often. Alerts, as we mentioned before, so we think back to the banking example, I'm trying to make a transfer for more than what I've got in my account, that I'm showing an alert. Some of the variations we've got in that are the styles. So a lot of the Bootstrap components, they've got these different color variations of primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, info, light and dark, all for different contexts. We've got the option of including links, including icons, and none of that code we're having to create ourselves. So it would just be a matter of I come in here, copy that code, go and paste it into my Power Pages site. So that's why I consider this low code as opposed to pro code. I'm just lifting and shifting their stuff. And also I can make that dismissible. Don't have to create any JavaScript, any CSS. Again, I just lift and shift that content. All it is in the markup I can see there's a class that says that should be dismissible. That's all that I need to do to take care of that. Cards, I'll show you some examples on my own sites in just a moment, but as I said, these are elements that I think are almost impossible to miss across the web. They're on just about every website and app that you can come across. And again, lots of variations with titles, subtitles, headers, footers, all that good stuff. So here are some various different cards that I've created for the baseball site. Tried to go in with lots of different variations of those for different sizes. I appreciate we're not got too much time left, so I'll speed up. But there we go, all with mobile responsive considered. So how many columns should that take up at small versus medium versus large? Should I reflow the content? So you see that actually appears quite different below a certain size. Tab lists, so I can jump between, again, a way of saving space really. So tabs are another component that we get out of the box with Bootstrap. The cards, again, adapting to be quite different for different screen sizes to make the most of the space that we've got. And then with modals, I've taken the absolute basics that you usually get from Bootstrap. So if I go to components and modals, what you're probably used to seeing with a modal is just your standard white modal with maybe with some context buttons on there with text content. I've spent the extra time on this site to say, well, in fact, I want it to be a more engaging model, a better branded model. So to start with, it's not white, it's in my brand colors. But some other changes are, maybe I want a 50-50 split. So perhaps you're used to that from things like welcome content, onboarding experiences are giving you some tips when you first land in an app. A dark variation of that. So I'm taking those out of the box components from Bootstrap, but I'm then skinning them. That's where I'm spending the effort doing the styling on my portals. So the users and the team that are picking this up after me have got an even bigger component library. So that's an example that I will use for something like a multi-set form. If there's maybe a guided process to purchase something, to sign up for something. Again, dark variation of that. Dark mode, in fact, is another benefit that we get with Bootstrap. Most of the elements, if not all, have got a dark mode built in. In fact, that one still needs a bit of work. But you see, they don't have to look exactly like the Bootstrap ones. You can apply your own styling and branding to it. But we're letting Bootstrap do the heavy lifting for us, for sure. And yeah, so another variation of the cards that might be useful to show is, again, going back to those breakpoints. So when I'm deciding how many columns of the screen split it up into 12 columns. How many do I want each card to take up? So with this bit of HTML, what I'm saying is, by default, take up 12 12ths, so the full width of the screen. But then at small resolutions, you can take up 6 12ths, so it'll be half the width. Same for medium, but then at large, it should be 3 12ths, which is why I'm getting one card equals 1/4 of the screen. And as I scale that down, you'll see the layout of the card adapts, the size adapts right down to mobile. And this is really what this particular site was optimized for mobile, because scouts, coaches, players, most likely we expect going to be using that from the baseball stadium as opposed, or the training field, as opposed to back in the office. So I think that's probably as much as we've got time for. There's much more I would like to show, but should we switch to questions now?
Can I just say that was great? I love that website. It looks so good.
Oh, thanks, mate.
With the cards,
Fabulous.
were you changing the layout of the card itself as well when it moved to the smaller breakpoints? Or was the card layout staying the same? I couldn't tell.
Let me see. Trying to remember what I did on that one, actually. Yeah, in fact, I think on that particular example, the layout of the card itself is similar. It's more kind of the prominence and the size on that one that's changing. On the card page, if I just share my screen again. Yeah, there's some examples on there where it changes. Can you see that again now? The black, white, and grey screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on some of these yellow cards, perhaps if I zoom out a little bit. Once we get beneath a certain size, the layout's changing. The position of the photos changing, certain items are hidden, and then when I get above a certain size, I see things like the stats on the card again.
Mm-hmm.
And with it being a masonry layout as well, you see that it also the layout of the page restacks as well.
It's very cool.
So I think something that's trying to find the best way to say this, but you can get a bit lost and keep readjusting screens, and you kind of get in the you get in the mindset as if that's what the user's sat there doing, adjusting the screen width. But yeah, they're either going to land on a mobile typically, or tablet, portrait, landscape, laptop full screen. So they're not really doing the readjusting. It's just how they land on there the first time.
If I can just ask one more thing. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you design this mobile first? So you initially designed the mobile version, then you worked your way through the breakpoints, building up? Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
But a lot of that reason for that is coming from the user. That, like I said, that they've dictated that's their use case. They know the audience. It's going to be typically a tournament that the scouting these players that player coming off the pitch wants to scan their bag tag and get so in fact a bit of random context, but part of what they can do through this site is they can buy a bag tag, an NFC enabled bag tag, so that when a coach spots them at the site, spots them at a game, I'm interested in signing you up for our team, they'll scan that card and it takes them directly to their personal profile on that site. So they'd land on the page like like Jordan's here. If someone spotted Jordan at a game, scan his bag tag, they're taken through to this. In fact, there's an example of the layout changing as well. It's not the prettiest of screens, that one, but I can see context, stats, their favourite stats, links to their profiles, summaries, all that good stuff. They've got kind of like a LinkedIn profile, I guess, that I can say, here are some highlights of my sports reel. yeah, all that's programmed in with Power Automate that when they sign up to the bag tag and they purchase subscription, that's printed off and posted out to them. So there's a physical card, is what I'm trying to say, besides the Bootstrap card.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
This presentation made my brain really happy. Not gonna lie.
Yay.
It scratched all of the itches that needed to be scratched.
But yeah, I would say let Bootstrap do the heavy lifting. It's a really great decision that Microsoft have made to bundle that in with Power Pages. In fact, it has been since ADX Day, but Microsoft have continued to do that. And really that means kind of the 80-20, they've done the 80% for you, and the bit of style and effort that goes into your project is, right, how do we make this on brand now? So for me, that's the greys, the golds, the specific fonts, that kind of thing. But I'm not having to do any of that from scratch. If you inspected that site in the browser dev tools, you would just see Bootstrap Jumbotron, Bootstrap Card, Bootstrap Modal, Bootstrap tooltips, toasts. In fact, toasts are another cool thing that you get with Bootstrap as well. So loads of these will be things that you're totally familiar with, that you see from everyday apps. And the idea is it's all been considered already. You're not having to code this. You're not having to control the look and feel. Really, all you're having to do is just say, right, perhaps my brand color is a bit that I need to change. And it's come in with all those variations of positions, of timing, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'll drop that link in the chat. Definitely well worth a look at Bootstrap, and in particular the Bootstrap components. And what you'll see as well is even the out of the box components, lists, forms, all that good stuff. They're using Bootstrap components as well. So you can maybe do your right click, inspect, and you'll be able to see what are those out of the box components made up of. So it'll be things like the responsive Bootstrap tables. When you click to open a record and it appears in a modal, that's using the Bootstrap modals.
Not gonna lie, when I first heard of Bootstrap and how much the IT department was relying on Bootstrap for everything development, I was like, why are we pulling up our bootstraps for everything? Like, it made no sense to me. And then finally, like, getting to see, oh, it's actually like a point and click type situation for dev. Like, this is what I want. Copy, paste. Now I have it.
Absolutely. And in fact, yeah, great point. So that, again, for getting used to Bootstrap, the grid system is a really great place to start. So I showed some of the breakpoints, but there's all kinds of different examples. And what you'll see is, even though you're having to touch a bit of code or copy and paste some code, getting really good responsive behavior on the web and therefore in Power Pages is so much easier than in Canvas apps. Not knocking what awesome work Keith and Co and Anna can do inside, and Charles, of course, all you guys, within Canvas apps. But I think it's fair to say it's pretty high effort, isn't it? You get a great result, but it's far from point and click and just change a few classes here and there.
Yeah, it's often quite a bit of work as well. Can often lead to clunky or still bugs where it's not quite right. As you say, when you've got the framework handling that for you, super useful.
Yeah, I would say Power Pages is definitely more of the pro dev route from Canvas apps, but it's totally worth it if you can make it happen.
Yeah, and in fact, a bit of a random tangent, but on the Power Platform Community High Five session, go on, don't leave us hanging, Keith and Sarah. Yeah, so on that session the other day, we had Stuart Baxter mentioned just about the reach of Power Pages versus Canvas apps and model-driven apps. He'd worked on a massive project recently that was both model-driven apps and Power Pages, and the model-driven app, which for me was a massive user base, 20,000 users. That exact same project had 2.8 million users per year on Power Pages. If you imagine that extra reach, 160, I've not just done that off the top of my head, I did actually get the calculator out, but 160 times the user base of what the model-driven app had. So if you think of that from a budget perspective, and you think of that from how important is that user experience, how much time is that saving us, how many calls to the contact center is that saving us, how much capacity is that freeing up, you kind of get the sense that they can be a lot bigger projects for sure. And achieving so much more ROI.
I'm going to flip to sharing my screen real quick. Thank you, both of you, Ambesh and Franco, for your presentations today. Wonderful. So happy to have more accessible content on here. Accessible content always. But next month's call coming up, we've got Heather and JP presenting next month. I do have a link for registration that I can paste in the chat. There it is. So if you guys want to register for next month's call now, before you forget, do that there. But thank you both for your presentations today. We're looking forward to having Heather and JP next month. And if you enjoyed the content, let us know. This is how you can get in touch with us. We probably should update this to include our LinkedIn group link, but for our whole user group link, because that's now a thing now. And what else? Did we take out the sessionize thing? No, that was at the beginning.
It was.
As always, we're always looking for sessions. 15 minutes is all we're asking for, but you can go up to 30 minutes if necessary. Please, 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 if you're looking, it's a new year, new you. Who decides maybe 2025 is the year of speaking? We can be an option for you to do that. So, sign up to give a 15-minute presentation. Maybe it's something that you built that was accessible, or that everybody was like, oh, the UX in here is great. Doesn't have to be anything super spectacular or world-changing, or, great if it does, but, even small, simple things are perfect content for presenting. Always looking for presentations. So feel free to submit that to Sessionize. And thank you all for being here today. Appreciate it, you all spending an hour of your Saturday with us. So y'all have a good rest of your weekend. We'll see you all next month.
Thank you so
Well,
much,
thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
See you next
See you.
month.